Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual programming to celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day today. Thank you for joining us, and we are glad to have you all here with us today. My name is Abdul Khalil Azizi. I'm the International Scholar Advisor and Multicultural Program Specialist working in the Office of Equity and Inclusion here at Idaho State University. The theme of this year is The First Urgency of Now by Dr. King. First, I would like to take a minute to thank all of our speakers for accepting our invitation to be with us and to speak at this historical day. Thank you everyone for taking your time away from your personal and your professional life to be with us and to speak at this historical day today. We are excited and looking forward to your remarks and your statements. Due to COVID-19 pandemic and the concern for the health and well-being of our students, staff, and community members, we have decided to celebrate Dr. King's Day virtually this year. We are saddened that we are not able to get together in person to celebrate this historical day in our traditional way of marching and so on. Yet, we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to come together to remember Dr. King's legacy and to celebrate this important day today. Today, we have a diverse and excellent group of speakers and presenters throughout our program. I'm excited and looking forward to each and all of our speakers' remarks and statements. I want to thank each and all of you once again for being with us today and to celebrate this historical day here. We are going to start the program by a video presentation of National Anthem. Then I would like to invite Stacy Gibson, the Director of Office of Equity and Inclusion, to share her remarks with us. We hope you all continue to stay with us until the end of the program. And thank you once again for joining us today. And with no further ado, we will start the program by a video presentation of National Anthem. Thank you, and please enjoy.
Welcome to Idaho State University's virtual Dr. Martin Luther King program. I'm Stacy Gibson, the Director of Equity and Inclusion. So many things have changed since we last met. It is unfortunate that we don't have the opportunity to gather in person this year to march and meet in solidarity of purpose. It is important that we continue to engage in ways that keep the health and safety of our community at the forefront of our concerns. So many of our families have been impacted by the pandemic. We must also be aware of the disproportionate impact the pandemic has had on the health of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as our community elders. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave their distant homes in hope of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We are standing on the ancestral lands of the eastern and western bands of the Northern Shoshone and the Bannock people. Ancestral lands of these peoples occupied vast regions encompassing present-day Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, and into Canada. We pay respects to their elders past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. I have been participating in this event for many years, as a student, as a parent with my son, and finally as a campus administrator. It has been my honor to be involved in this event throughout the years. I have to tell you that this year feels different. The weight of Dr. King's words and works hang over us as we fight for the very fundamentals of democracy and civil rights. We're facing challenges right now that seem unsurmountable. Once again, we need what Dr. King called the fierce urgency of now. I want to close my remarks by honoring two civil rights legends that we lost this year. Representative John Lewis, the son of a sharecropper and an American icon who fought on the front lines against racial injustice his entire life, passed this year at age 80. Representative Lewis said in 2018, "Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful, be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or even a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in some good trouble, necessary trouble." This year, we lost another icon, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. One of my personal heroes, notorious RBG, broke ground for women in the field of law at a time when women were not welcome. As a law researcher, a law professor, a lawyer, and a judge, she consistently fought for gender equality and justice with class, grit, and grace. I leave you with one of my favorite quotes by Justice Ginsburg. "Women belong in all the places where decisions are being made. It shouldn't be that women are the exception." Thank you to all the participants in today's program and all of you here in attendance. A special thank you to the event's organizers, my staff, Khalil Azizi and Dr. Henry Evans. Please welcome next ISU's President, Kevin Satterly.
This is the third year that I have been asked to speak at this annual event to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But never before has the weight of speaking at this event felt so poignant. In the last year, we have witnessed some of the pervasive and repugnant racial injustices in our society. We have had a magnifying glass and a megaphone speaker directed on the racism and structural inequities of our society that are a legacy of the racial supremacy that dawned in this country so many centuries ago. The theme of this event is the fierce urgency of now. What weighs on my heart today when reflecting on Dr. King's message from this particular speech is that there still has not been a fierce urgency of now. He delivered the speech where that quote is pulled from on April 4th, 1967, almost 54 years ago. Yet here we are, in 2021, still speaking about the same injustice, the same racism, and the same call to action. This should enrage us. This should devastate us. But more than anything, this should inspire us to act. 54 years from today, we as a society cannot continue to be calling to action around the same issues. We cannot be hoping for change in our communities, in our actions, and in the hearts of our citizenry. We have an obligation to do something about injustice and racism now. In the speech where Dr. King speaks of the urgency of now, he said this: "Some of us who have already begun to break the silence of the night have found that the calling to speak is often a vocation of agony. But we must speak. We must speak with all the humility that is appropriate to our limited vision, but we must speak." And then he went on to say, "Perhaps a new spirit is rising among us. If it is, let us trace its movement well and pray that our inner being may be sensitive to its guidance, for we are deeply in need of a new way beyond the darkness that seems so close around us." So today, the message is of urgency. And I believe that inherent in that is the urgency of action. And as I have often thought, but what can I do? I am one person in a rural part of the world with relatively little influence to alter the face of injustice in this world. Well, do not let that thought stop you. From where you are, from whatever advantage you have, use it to make a difference. And please, let me give you 3 ways in which you can make a difference. First, education. Education is the core of why we are here at the university. And meaningful social change is always accompanied with education. So educate. And by this, I mean educate yourself and others. Learn more for yourself, and then pass that knowledge on to others. Second, give. Contribute to this endeavor in meaningful ways. Give of your time and give of your money. Help with the urgency by investing your effort and your resources. And third, act. It is time to address racism. When you see and hear injustice in your daily life, do not sit idly by and let it pass you. It is time to address it and address it right. And to do those things, we need to remain focused on the primary cause that this is about ending racism. It's about equality, equality for all people. And in the words of Dr. King, it is about a call for, quote, fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation, and is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all people. That is what this is about, and the time for that is now.
Lift every voice and sing, earth, heaven, ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of our new day begun. March on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn has died, yet with a steady beat and not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers died. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk of the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our God, true to our native land, true to our native land.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this year's Martin Luther King Jr.'s Day. My name is Thelma Annie, and I'll be your keynote speaker for this year's event. A little bit about me. I'm a business major here at ISU. I'm a senior, about to graduate this semester. Today, I'll be talking to you about the fierce urgency of now. This was a concept that Dr. King emphasized a lot. It was a concept he used to emphasize the urgency of acting now, the urgency of taking action when needed. I will use an example in which I do have experience in. So, as we all know, George Floyd was killed on May 25th, 2020, and that sparked a nationwide protest against policing and police brutality in America. Personally, that led me to start my research on the racial bias against the Black community, because it was only something I had heard of and hadn't been very invested in. But as I did my research, I found out that there's a disproportionate rate of policing in the Black community. Also, I noticed that this fight dated back to the civil rights movement that started in 1954. According to PNAS, Black men are about 2.5 times more likely to be killed by the police over a life course than white men, and Black women are about 1.4 times more at risk than white women. Months after the protest on George Floyd, on October 8, 2020, there was another nationwide protest in Nigeria, where I come from. It was tagged End SARS. And this was also a fight against police brutality. A police unit known as the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, aka SARS, were accused of harassing, killing, and brutalizing Nigeria. And this was not circumstantial. There was solid evidence on that. Now, these are two events that happened across the world, but there was one purpose. I'm going to link these two events to a quote that Martin Luther King used. He said, "We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now." I'm going to start with saying the fact that tomorrow is today. When I think about that phrase, I think about how many times people have said maybe it'll get better tomorrow, or maybe change will happen tomorrow. But we're now faced with the fact that change has to happen today, and it has to start today. Continuing, he said, "In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is no such thing as being too late. There is no time for apathy or complacency. This is a time of vigorous and positive action." These two events, though, are from separate reasons and across the world, in separate places. There was need for change, and there was need for the urgency of that change to happen. King's words inspired the whole nation to open a way to march forward with courage and strength to put an end to segregation. In King's speech in 1963, he spoke of the fierce urgency of now. And a lot was accomplished during the civil rights movement. But we also need to apply the urgency of now to 2020 and 2021. These two events were something that I was directly involved in. The End SARS movement, it was so loud that it got the Nigerian government pressured enough to send the military to shoot at the people. Speaking from my experience with End SARS, it had been happening for years, but there hadn't been any protests so big that it shook the world and left an impact on the government. The government was pressured enough to the point of killing over 70 Nigerians and denying it. It became too much to ignore. That is the same thing that is happening here in America. It happened in 1954 with King, and in 2020 after the death of George Floyd. These two events that is happening now require change, require bravery. And that is what the youth went out on the street to protest about. It did not matter how late it was. Like King said, there is no such thing as being late. There's a popular idiom or a popular quote that says, "It's better late than never." I'm going to end this speech by quoting Martin Luther King's acceptance speech when he was receiving his Nobel Prize. He said, "Our survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change." We, as the youth, need to understand that change is inevitable. And we have to bring the purpose of tomorrow to today. We cannot give up on trying to change. We have to challenge the status quo. The more pressure we put on the status quo, the more closer we are to change the status quo. Police brutality is something that is happening today. It's been happening a while back. And it's something that needs to change. When Martin Luther King was fighting to end segregation and to get rights for African Americans, there was police brutality involved. There was politics involved to derail that movement. But at the end of the day, his vision came to pass. And now we are faced with the same urgency. The urgency to act now. And we need to take that opportunity and apply King's words to now. Like he said, our very survival depends on our ability to adjust and to remain vigilant and to face the challenge of change. Thank you.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summit of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bina Manan, and I'm honored to speak to you all today as an ally who may not fully understand the struggles and challenges of being Black in America, as I have now lived in those shoes and I cannot speak from that experience. I can only speak to you all today with a deep acknowledgement of the privileges I have, and with that, I can offer my support and suggestions on how people like me can and should work together as allies in pushing for greater justice, equity, and inclusivity. With that said, I want to apologize in advance if I have taken the space away from a Black and Indigenous person of color who may have given a better message today. I humbly thank you for the opportunity to speak on a topic and at a time I value greatly. I recognize my presence here today, speaking at such a platform, would not be possible if it wasn't for the battles for justice peacefully fought by the Honorable Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the activists of the Civil Rights era, those who advocated for us all. We might have made some progress to a certain degree from the time of the Civil Rights Movement, when Dr. King urged Black and non-Blacks to come together and fight for justice for all, including marginalized communities, for people like me. However, we have also seen significant stagnation in the prosperity of Black and Indigenous communities. We are all well aware of the injustices faced by the people of color in today's America and know for a fact that much has not changed since the 1980s. So I pose a question to you all. What can you do? What can you and I do as allies to bring forth the change that Dr. King dreamed of? And how do we turn his dream into a reality? And that is the fierce urgency of now. Many will say we are living in a different time. We have come a long way, but I counter that. Too many of our Black and Indigenous fellows continue to face the same harsh realities of the past. Black Americans face injustices in many ways. Let's start with what has been on the front pages for years now, police brutality. We know for a fact this isn't a new phenomenon. This atrocity has been occurring from the time of Dr. King and before him. It has dragged its ugliness through the Clinton years and with the election of President Barack Obama, where for a brief moment we may have thought it may end, but it sure did not stop. In fact, it continued and got exasperated. Coming into the last 4 years, we have only seen the problem intensify. We have continued to see an intense use of police force and criminalization of Black and brown bodies. However, I want to emphasize these injustices don't just end there. This is one element of a greater issue of systemic racism. You can pick any sector and you will realize that injustices are happening. This is why it's called systemic. It is ingrained in nearly every way people move through society. Black and Indigenous folks experience it in public policies and practices, in public and private institutions such as banks, schools, companies, health services, government agencies, and most visibly in law enforcement. We continue to circle back to police force, but I want to extend the conversation to other arenas. Let's examine unemployment rates, wealth gap, housing, healthcare, voter suppression, and incarceration rates. Add to the mix the impact of COVID-19. We have seen through various statistics the impact on Black communities has been by far one of the worst through the pandemic. The Black community, particularly Black women, have faced the highest levels of unemployment through this time. As noted by many scholars, Black women are usually the first to be fired and last to be hired. For decades, and even recently, studies conducted have shown discrimination in hiring practices that have kept Black folks from excelling within the workforce to higher paying jobs. Experiments have been conducted time and time again, and recently by Harvard University, that shows that applicants with names not American or white sounding enough don't receive callbacks as compared to those that do, even when the applicants have similar, if not identical, applications. In fact, only 25% of applicants got the callback if they had white in their name, and only 10% if they kept their ethnic name. Furthermore, as of a few months ago, only 4 Fortune 500 companies had Black CEOs. This pattern also continues in the upper ranks of government, where only 57 plus members of the 535 members of Congress are Black. When I see such drastic numbers, I feel a sense of urgency to act. I cannot emphasize enough that representation matters. I want to now bring your attention to the wealth and wage gap. Studies from 2018 show the average Black worker earned just 62% of what the average white worker made, and similarly for Black women at 63% in 2019. That means it takes the typical Black woman 19 months to be paid what the average white man takes home in just 12 months. People of color, and particularly women of color, have to work almost twice as long and hard to take home the same amount as their white male counterparts. That is a sad reality for our nation when Black women are part of the workforce in greater numbers than any other female group. As for the wealth gap, I can share in 2019, the median white household had 13 times the wealth of the median Black household. That's about $134,000 for a white household and compared to $11,000 only for the Black household. All of these issues of income gap are interconnected to other problems. Lower income for Black female leads to higher poverty rates, which in turn is linked to student loan debt. Higher student loan debt is a deterrent for Black student enrollment, and once enrolled, the students face challenges at the university level. Many universities have not created the proper support system to increase Black student graduation rates or retention rates. Campuses are filled with discriminatory and judgmental practices. Too often, students and faculty make assumptions of Black students' enrollment to be based solely on athletics and not merit. That type of behavior is discouraging and contributes to poor college experience, leading to higher dropout rates. College enrollment is linked to early childhood education as well. Lack of rigorous, robust programs in public schools have also failed our Black children. This in turn is connected to lesser funding compared to what you may find at predominantly white schools. Moving on, I want to highlight another major concern, the idea of the American dream and upward mobility. White children from the bottom quarter of the socioeconomic ladder are more likely to move up to a higher income bracket as compared to Black children during the course of their lives. Housing discrimination similarly is prevalent. Denial of loans, unfair loan terms, discrimination by real estate agents, higher eviction rates, that itself is a predatory practice. There's a whole economy surrounding that. Segregated neighborhood practices, and all of this leads to lower home ownership among Blacks, limiting their upward mobility. The level of barriers the Black community has to face daily is not only extremely exhausting, but also clearly frustrating. I haven't even mentioned incarceration rates, harsher sentences compared to whites for similar crimes, and criminalization of Black Americans. No wonder Black Americans face higher health risk as well. Another arena filled with discriminatory practices and lack of access. Look at maternal health, infant mortality, cardiovascular health, mental health, kidney disease, and cancer are a lot worse in the Black population. And that's connected to access to healthcare, which a lot of Black communities face as a challenge. That is a deterrent for access to care, and also lack of it leads to worse life expectancy. There are clear race-based inequalities in healthcare delivery and health outcomes. I also want to point out all the mentioned struggles are significantly worse if you are a person of color who identifies as lesbian, gay, transgender, or queer. Not to bore you with numbers, but this is all rooted in systemic racist practices, which have kept people of color disenfranchised. Starting from slavery, segregation, unequal access to government programs like welfare, redlining, and continual institutionalized racism. These discriminatory practices have led to an imbalance of resources necessary for career advancement and education. We see over and over again the value of the Black body is no way near the value of his or her white counterpart. We need that to change, and we need to see that change happen now. There is a great sense of urgency. Why, you may ask? Well, it is because we have Black families who are facing the same problems intergenerationally. Families where their great-grandfather was discriminated against following the grandfather, then the father, and so forth. When should that stop? How many generations need to pass until there is equity in our systems and an end to such discrimination? Shouldn't it stop now so the next generation can no longer face the same barriers and disadvantages faced by the previous generations? It is not an obligation for us. Is it not an obligation for us as community members at large to rally together and push for changes in every sector of society? Policymakers, educators, scientists, physicians, we all should pay attention to these issues and together ask ourselves, what more can we do to address them? Because if we don't do anything, the onus is on us. Personally, I feel if I don't do anything, I am also responsible for the continual injustices. I cannot sit on the sidelines, being fully aware and witness these actions happen. I would not want my children to look back at me in the future and say, Mom, what did you do to help your fellow citizens? It isn't enough that doors opened for me. Granted, they didn't open easily, but I got access. I got to move forward in life. I want to make sure I don't shut that door behind me. I want to bring with me who I can into the room. And if I cannot, maybe I'll take the party to their door. I want to create a space for others who have not been granted that space, that platform. So I urge you to continue to act, to continue to support the youth of today who have taken to the streets to peacefully protest. I encourage them to practice their right, to voice their concerns. They are the epitome of democracy. I see them as the right kind of troublemakers who feel the fierce sense of urgency, who no longer want to wait for things to change like their predecessors, who despite being patient and waiting, never got the results. We must respond to the youth of today, show them that we are with them in demanding fair and equitable policies and practices. Through simple measures, we can advocate for Black, Indigenous people of color by supporting programs such as affirmative action, support Black businesses, artists, writers, athletes, by highlighting that Black scientists and change makers to our children and standing alongside our fellow Black Americans when they fight for justice. We must push for accountability and transparency in all arenas. And importantly, we must educate ourselves and become aware of the unfair policies and practices. We all must use our platform and our privileges to help further the cause of ending discriminatory practices. Additionally, I also remind you that their demands for justice does not equate to you losing your rights. Acknowledging their struggles and concerns doesn't diminish from another person's rights or problems. It is about them and hearing them and acknowledging their pains and frustrations. And finally, doing something about it with a fierce urgency of now. Thank you.
Hello again, everyone, and thank you for staying with us until this point. We would like to request all of you to stay until the end of the program to learn about our week-long events that we have scheduled for this week. At this point, we would like to start the MLK Award ceremony. Every year, we are selecting 3 individuals from the community for the following 3 awards. The MLAK Emerging Leaders Award, the MLAK Humanitarian Award, and the MLAK Citizen Appreciation Award. The 3 individuals that have been selected for this year, they are not aware that they have been selected to receive this awards. So let's go and see who is the recipient of our Emerging Leaders Award today. The MLAK Emerging Leaders Award goes to Mr. Ayush Jaha, the current president of ASICU. Mr. Ayush is the president of ASICU right now, and he is originally from Nepal. He came to ICU to continue his higher education. And when Mr. Ayush came here as a student, I had the privilege of knowing Mr. Ayush and working with him. He started to work with International Student Association, and then he became the president of International Student Association. And then he started working with the Nepali Student Association, and then he also moved forward, and then now he's the president of ASICU. Mr. Ayush always demonstrated the leadership skills, listening skills, and his working hard ethics shows that he is the best choice to receive this awards. So Mr. Ayush, congratulations on receiving the MLAK Emerging Leaders Award. I'm very happy for you, and you're well deserved. I will make sure to contact you to either come to our office to pick up your award, or I will personally deliver it to you, to your home or to your office. Congratulations once again, and thank you for everything you do for ICU and for students. The MLAK Humanitarian Award goes to Dr. Fahim Rahim. I'm sure most of the people here in the community knows Dr. Fahim Rahim for his humanitarian work, not only here in the US, but also overseas. To name a few of the countries that he's always involved, and he's traveling to helping people, or Nepal, Pakistan, and a couple of few others. Dr. Fahim, congratulations on receiving the MLAK Humanitarian Award, and thank you for everything you do for everyone in need. I will make sure to deliver your award to your office maybe by end of this week. Congratulations once again, and thank you for all of your help. Our third award, the MLAK Citizen Appreciation Award, goes to Sonia Martinez. Sonia is the STEM Diversity and Outreach Coordinator here at Idaho State University. I know that Sonia is very kind and very generous. She's always going beyond to help somebody in need. She's involved in the community. She's making everyone feel welcome, and she's always helping with the diversity inclusion efforts here at ICU and also off campus. Congratulations, Sonia, for receiving the MLAK Appreciation Award this year. I will make sure to deliver the award to your office by end of this week. Thank you so much for all of your hard work and for making everyone feel welcome, for your effort and diversity and inclusion here. Thank you everyone for staying with us, and I would like to congratulate the 3 recipients of our MLAK Awards this year, and please stay with us and enjoy the rest of the program.
Hi, my name is Deja Bingham. I'm a student at Idaho State University, and I've had the pleasure of working with the DRC on and off for the last 5 years, as well as attending the Marin Luther King Symposium. It's truly my honor to speak to you guys today. I do feel a little bit inadequate because the docket of people speaking is incredible. I feel very fortunate that they asked me to talk today. So we're going to go over the urgency of now. What is urgency and when is now? Have you ever noticed you can replace the word urgency with the word change in the topic of Dr. King's speech, and it conveys the same thing? When is change and what is urgency, and when is the right time for those actions to come into play? I think that 2020 showed us there is no time like the present. There's no time to sit around and think when and where things should happen. The time is now. I was ashamed to admit I was not familiar with this piece of literature from Dr. King, but when I listened, I felt tears roll down my cheeks. I felt a lump in the back of my throat, and I felt my body ache the way it does whenever I remember that I am just one event away from being a story in the paper or a march in the street. Dr. King was a man wise beyond his years, calling out things we are seeing come back in a full circle today. We can step back and look at a nation that seems to be nothing but divided, a nation filled with hate, fear of change, and a future that is something like none of us could have ever predicted. But I think there's something that is so beautiful that comes with the idea and the desire to change. There's something so beautiful about the way things end because it means something new is about to begin. It's something that's hard to fathom. We are fighting the same battles we have fought for the last 60 plus years. And I've always wondered what I would do if I saw a revolution. I wondered if I would have known what was actually happening. I wondered if I would have jumped up and screamed from the rooftops, and I wondered where I would be when people talk about the days that changed their lives. In 2020, I believe I saw the start of a revolution happen. I saw people stand and leave their desks. I saw families grab their little ones and head to the streets. I saw students walk out of classrooms, and together in unison, we screamed, "No justice, no peace." I saw people that I loved, cared for, and respected take to the internet and say things I know they would have never had the audacity to say to me in person. I now wonder where we will all be in 10 years. I remember being a 15-year-old girl in a class in Idaho and hearing about the murder of Trayvon Martin. I remember fighting back tears as I looked at my white classmates and simply stated, "You have never been Black in an all-white neighborhood." To say things have come in a full circle would truly be the understatement of the century. Retired Air Force General Lester L. Lyles said in June 2020, "When I think of achieving a beloved community and I think of the challenges we face today, I think today these needs are greater than ever." How true it rings that in 2020, the simple idea of love one another seems further and further away. In Dr. King's acceptance speech of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, he stated, "Our survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, and to remain vigilant to face the challenges of change." So you may be asking yourself, how do we change? And where does this change start? And simply stated, it starts with you and I. It starts with the fact that as humans, we are resilient. It starts with paying the bill or a check for a stranger. It is opening the door for someone who seems that their hands are full, or smiling at someone that is having a bad day. It calls for calling out the leaders in our communities and in our nation and reminding them that talk is cheap. We can and must have action. Viola Davis said, "We are always given these seemingly devastating experiences that could absolutely break us, but what the caterpillar calls the end of the world, the master calls the butterfly." Change and urgency go hand in hand, you see. You simply cannot have one without the other. I would like to leave you with a challenge today to remember that we are all the same. We all have silent struggles and silent battles. We all have things that we are scared of and are ashamed to talk about. But we must remember something simple. Kindness is free. Change is free, and it must start in our home behind closed doors. And when we think no one is watching, we must go above and beyond to take care of our neighbors, friends, and family, because love will always go further than hate. MLK said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great of a burden to bear." Remember to carry a little extra love and grace as we close out a year that has been hard for so many of us. In closing, I leave you with the words of Dr. King, simply stating, "Hatred paralyzes life. Love releases it. Hatred confuses life. Love harmonizes it. Hatred darkens life. Love illuminates it." Thank you.
This is the most important and crucial period of your lives, for what you do now and what you decide now at this age may well determine which way your life shall go. And the question is whether you have a proper, a solid, and a sound blueprint And I want to suggest some of the things that should be in your life's blueprint. Number one, in your life's blueprint should be a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, and your own somebodyness. Don't allow anybody to make you feel that you are nobody. Always feel that you count. Always feel that you have worth. And always feel that your life has ultimate significance. Secondly, in your life's blueprint, you must have, as a basic principle, the determination to achieve excellence in your various fields of endeavor. You're going to be deciding as the days and the years unfold what you will do in life, what your life's work will be. Once you discover what it will be, set out to do it, and to do it well. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. For it isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. And finally, in your life's blueprint must be a commitment to the eternal principles of beauty, love, and justice. Well, life for none of us has been a crystal staff, but we must keep moving. We must keep going. If you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but by all means, keep moving.
Good morning. My name is Henry Evans. I'm the Associate Director at Idaho State University in the Office of Equity and Inclusion. I would like to express our deep gratitude for all of the speakers today. Ms. Stacy Gibson, the Director of Equity and Inclusion, Idaho State University President Kevin Satterly, our keynote speaker, Ms. Thelma Ani, Ms. Bina Fahim, and last but not least, Mr. Khalil Azizi, who worked tirelessly in conceptualizing and working to create this event in these trying times. Their insights and reflection have given us all something to think about as we consider what to do with the time we have left. I would also like to thank our office staff and university partners, without whom creating this event would have been infinitely more difficult. I would again like to extend particular thanks to Ms. Shirley Taysom, who is the glue that holds our office together. Mr. Craig Joseph and Ms. Malia Brown from the ISU Division of Student Affairs and the ISU Office of Marketing and Communications. Last but not least, I would like to thank you for choosing to spend your time with us as we consider the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. As today's speakers point out, although it has been more than 50 years since his passing, we still have much work to do as we continue the American experiment. And although he left us before he can complete his mission, the impact of Dr. King's work and words continue to reverberate through our national consciousness, urging us to be better individuals, neighbors, communities, and society. Dr. King was able to galvanize a movement of people from all walks of life who were committed to creating the beloved community where members, bound together by the transformative power of love and the recognition that we are all part of mutuality. And today, his words ring out with piercing poignancy. In one of his most memorable speeches, Dr. King spoke to the nation regarding the need for us all to become actively engaged in creating a better society. In his I Have a Dream speech, he told us that the civil rights movement had arisen to remind Americans of the fierce urgency of now, that it was time to make real the promise of America and American democracy. He stated, now is the time for us to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid bedrock of brotherhood, and that it was time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. He stated further that it was perilous for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. As he stated, the sweltering summer of the people's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. He recognized that 1963 was not an end, but a beginning. Reflecting on this past year, Dr. King's words are truly prescient. The struggle for justice and community continues, and clearly there is much work to be done. So each of us today must find the strength to persevere in difficult times. And while it may seem a difficult task, I have faith that the power is in our community and that we can find the strength and the faith to do so. As Dr. King admonished us, each of us must act with a renewed commitment to the urgency to create a society that does not seek to recreate social hierarchy, but rather to create something better. The end goal, he reminds us, is reconciliation. The end goal, he argues, is redemption and the creation of the beloved community in which there is a type of spirit, a type of love that can transform foes into friends. He states, this community will transform the deep gloom of the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new one. It is the love which will bring out miracles in the hearts of men. So as we consider what to do as we move forward, let us reflect on the legacy of Dr. King. Let us not forget that it's important for us to be actively engaged in creating the vision that we would like to our community to be, and to act with urgency, as that is what unites us and allows us to find the faith in the doing. Thank you everyone for spending some of your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you at more Diversity Resource Center events.
So tomorrow, Tuesday, January 19, we have a presentation on Dr. King's legacy on service. We have our wonderful presenter, Kenneth Monroe, the president of Pocatello NAACP. This presentation is going to be virtual between noon and 1. And then on Wednesday, we have a movie. This movie can be, you can watch this movie on online. Of course, you have to go to this website, icu.edu/Bengal Theater, and log in with your ICU login and password information, and you can watch this movie one time or multiple times in the comfort of your office, your home, student lounge, or your housing. And then from today, January 18 to February 1st, we have our office, the Diversity Resource Center, is partnering with the Office of the Dean of the Students to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by serving our local nonprofit agencies. We are collecting socks, we are collecting personal hygienes to donate to the seniors living in assisted living center here in our beautiful community of Pocatello. If you have items you would like to donate, you are welcome to bring them to the Diversity Resource Center in the Rendezvous building, or you can take it to the Student Union building on the second floor and donate at the front desk. You can find all of this information on our website at icu.edu/DRC.